wonder if this is too loud. Let me turn it down a bit. I like a little bit of music. I'm reading out of Eyes of Horus. It's a book by Joan Marshall Grants. She was a seer, and she used to remember her previous incarnations. This one is as Ra-Up, 3,500 BC in the ancient Egypt, and she is the son of a priestess of Ra, and it is about the oryx, which is one of 18 nomarchs, and young Ra-Up will be the heir to this. And we have travelled quite a long way. We are now in the third part of the book, and I think it is chapter 5, Roads to the Horizon. And I start. Roads to the Horizon. I had been to see Neku, and on my way home saw a runner panting up the avenue. He recognized me and called out, "Where is Rodan? I have news he must hear at once." "He won't be back until late this evening. He went to the house of the Nomarch 3 days ago, but he will have left there by river before noon today." The man stood still, his hands trembling from prolonged exertion. "Come to Rodan's house and wait for him," I said. "Hanuk is also away, but perhaps I can help you." He followed me into the garden pavilion and drank the cup of mead I gave him, although he would not eat anything until he had first told me his story. 5 of my friends have been killed while we were paying our tribute by labor on Pharaoh's road. I managed to escape. Rodan cannot know what's happening outside the oryx, or he would tell us to rise up at once against our oppressors. His eyes stared past me as though he was describing something taking place while he watched, as though I were a blind man with whom he was trying to share his sight. I and 5 others came from a village on the northern boundary of the Jackal. We all belonged to the Watchers, but we were told that until the time comes for the new laws, we must continue to obey the old. We could not pay our taxes, so although we were free men, we had to work on the royal road. We were badly fed, and the huts they gave us to sleep in were filthy and verminous. But we had expected that, and would not have grumbled against it. It is easy not to grumble when you have something to look forward to. That part of the road runs over marshy ground, and they are paving it with stone blocks. There are only 2 thumb joints in thickness, but the next barge load brought stones larger than those used before, being 3 cubic square. The old blocks were small enough to be carried by 1 man, though even those were a heavy load. But the weaker of us could not even lift these from the ground. There was a new overseer. He did not believe that the quarries had sent this stone by mistake, and that it had been intended as facing stones for a new wall at the temple near the old capital. I don't know whether this is true. It's only what I was told. The overseer had his orders. Each man must carry 1 paving stone a distance of 6,000 paces, 3 times a day. A few of us protested, and for answers were given 3 strokes each from the whipman. So we tried to obey the orders. A few of the strongest took 1 block to the appointed place between dawn and noon, but the rest could only manage 1 between 2 men, and though they ran all the way back, they couldn't make 6 journeys while the light lasted. We were not given shoulder pads, and the weight of the stones soon cut nearly to the bone, until blood was running down our bodies faster than sweat. After 4 days of it, the 6 of us went to the overseer, saying that we refused to work under such conditions, and that we would go back to our village to tell the Nomarch we were being unjustly treated. He told us to come that evening to the house where he was living, which belonged to the headman of a nearby village, and promised that we should be permitted to return to the Jackal and could tell our fellow workers that they would not see us again. He had soldiers waiting to greet us. They tied us up so that the whipman could work on us interrupted. There was a disused storehouse on the far side of the courtyard. We were shut in there after the first flogging, and told that each day 1 of us would be taught how to carry stones for the instruction of the others. I was the last of the 6. I had watched the other 5 staggering up and down, and whenever they stumbled, the whipman drove them on. Then, when they couldn't get up anymore, he stove in their skulls. He was very cruel, and he enjoyed making the next man dig the grave for the one who had provided entertainment the day before. How did you escape? When the whipped man brought us food on the last day, he was foolish enough to stay to mock me, saying as there was no one left to dig my grave, I should have to demand the last courtesies from the vultures. I was lying on some dirty straw in the corner. The room was dark, for the only light came through the half-open door. He thought it would be a good jest to throw the swill in my face, and he stooped over me to make sure of his aim. The feel of his neck under my fingers was better than bread to a starving man. His tongue looked as big as a calf's when it came bursting out of his mouth. I bent his head back until I heard the neck snap, so sure I hadn't bungled it. I didn't go back to the jackal. I don't trust the Nomarch. He would not dare to protect me if he knew I had killed the servant of an overseer, and in my own village Pharaoh's soldiers would be looking for me. But Rodan will know I did right, won't he? I only took 1 life in exchange for 5, and I gave him a quick death. Not that I had any choice. It was a good sound that crack his neck made, nearly as loud as the crack of his own whip. I took him along to the house where people newly arrived at Hotep-Ra lodged until work had been allotted to them. I made him eat 2 raw eggs beaten up in goat's milk, and then sat with him until he fell asleep. Then I went down to the landing stage to see if Rodan's boat was yet in sight. It was just coming round the bend, and in a few minutes we were exchanging greetings. He had brought a letter from Kies and one from father, but before reading them I told him about the man who had just come to us for protection. His name is Kenhan, I said. He has a kinsman here, and once stayed with him for a day or 2 when he was passing through the Nome. He belongs to the jackal, but is frightened to return there. I'm afraid it may be necessary to remove the jackal, said Rodan thoughtfully. He will join us when the time comes, but only because he thinks he will have more power in the assembly of Nomarchs than he has at present command. His son, if he fully recovers from the injury he received in the lion hunt, may accede, though I hear the loss of his foot has affected his judgment. Hanuk said he was embittered when they last met and inclined to blame Ra for the shaft of his spear breaking, saying, I think it was intended for a joke, that Set made better weapons for his followers. A Nomarch whose people do not come to him when they are in trouble is condemned, as are parents whose children cannot trust them. Then you won't send Kenhan away? Not until there is something which he can do better elsewhere. It might have been wiser if he had only rendered the whipped man unconscious without the addition of breaking his neck, but that neither you nor I are yet in a position to judge. It would depend whether the whipped man was obeying orders through ignorance or fear, or whether he enjoyed the power his unsavory office gave him. He needn't have thrown the food in Kenhan's face, I said, nor need he have said his only grave would be in a vulture's belly. You didn't tell me that, Ra'ab. I must impress on you that it's just such details which enable one to form an accurate opinion. The whipped man exceeded his duty, and mocked one whom he thought was helpless. That the other was not helpless I consider a most apt example of summary justice. I think Kenhan may try to stir up trouble amongst the others, who as yet don't understand that we have to wait until the right moment before we take action. He kept on muttering, Rodan must act at once. We can't let things go on any longer. I will talk to him when he's rested, said Rodan. It is impossible to argue with a man who lacks either sleep or food. A few days later, Rodan said to me, You were right in thinking Kenhan would try to spread dissatisfaction. He has collected a following of 20 of the more impatient new arrivals, and has even gone so far as to threaten to betray us, unless I give the order for immediate action. Shall we have to imprison them? I consider that very unlikely, Rab. If the eyes of Horus are unable to influence those who have already joined the Watchers, it is impossible that we have sufficient wisdom to rule Egypt. Isn't it even more improbable that Ra would let us be betrayed unless we are unworthy to interpret his laws? Tell Kanhan to bring his friends here this evening, so that I can discuss the matter with them. Rodin welcomed them most amicably and insisted that each in turn should tell him exactly why they considered the time for action had come. It became increasingly obvious that while most of them genuinely wanted to better their fellow countrymen as soon as possible, they were also influenced by the trouble of having to learn how to be watchers. Yet their loyalty to Rodin was sufficiently strong for them not to want to do anything without his consent, and I saw that if he gave them a direct order, they would obey him, even though it might be unwillingly. I stop here. There's somebody at the